The wind howled across the empty road as Clarissa flipped the closed sign on the door of her little diner. Snow danced in wild circles under the flickering street lamp. The diner, once full of life, now stood quiet and cold. Please like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and stared through the glass. It had been a rough year, too rough. Business had dried up ever since the new highway opened 6 miles west. Now, only a few loyal truckers passed through. The cupboards were nearly bare. Just a few cans of soup, some stale bread, and a half pot of cold coffee. Clarissa turned to shut off the lights when she noticed something moving outside. Shapes in the snow. Her heart skipped. 1, 2 more? She stepped closer to the glass and counted again. 12. 12 truckers huddled near their trucks, faces buried under scarves, shoulders sagging from the cold. Her breath caught in her throat. No one else would take them in tonight, not in this storm. She glanced toward the kitchen. What do I even have to give? She whispered. But then she reached for the door handle anyway and pulled it open. Come in, she called out into the storm. Come in before you freeze. The first man to step inside shook off the snow from his heavy coat. He looked around with weary eyes, then gave her a hopeful smile. You still serving? He asked, voice rough from the cold. Highways shut down about 15 miles back. Ain't nothing else open. Clarissa hesitated. The pot of coffee sputtered low behind her. The shelves were nearly empty, but she nodded. Come on in. Warm yourself up. The man let out a relieved sigh and walked in, boots thudding wetly on the worn floor. The bell over the door jingled again. Then again. One by one, more truckers came in, faces red from windburn, boots soaked through. The little diner filled quickly, the heat from their bodies pushing back the cold. Clarissa's husband, Franklin, watched from his corner by the window. His wheelchair creaked slightly as he shifted. He wore his old denim jacket and didn't say a word, just watched. In the kitchen, their young helper, Jordan, stood frozen, still holding a dish towel in his hand. What do we do? He asked quietly. Clarissa met Franklin's eyes across the room. For a second, she saw something spark in him, something that hadn't been there in a long time. She turned to Jordan. We feed them, she said. Use what we've got. No one sleeps cold tonight. Jordan blinked, then nodded. You got it. The kitchen came alive in that moment. Clarissa rolled up her sleeves and started heating the last of the soup. She sliced up the stale bread and poured what remained of the coffee. Franklin slowly wheeled closer, his eyes scanning the room, memories chasing away the quiet that had settled over his soul. Plates clattered. Laughter sparked. Boots stomped to bring feeling back into frozen toes. Jordan brought out sandwiches made from leftover buns. Clarissa filled mugs and passed them down the line. It's not much, she said, but it's hot. One of the drivers grinned. Lady, you just saved our night. Franklin listened, lips twitching into the ghost of a smile. The room had become more than a shelter. For one night, it was alive again. The walls echoed with stories, with names shared across steaming bowls of soup. Where you from? One driver asked another. How long you been on the road? Clarissa leaned against the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. The snow outside piled high against the windows, but inside the storm felt far away. Still, her mind wandered. Would anything come after this? Could kindness stretch far enough to meet tomorrow? She didn't have the answers, but tonight she had purpose. You need more coffee? She asked a quiet driver sitting by the door. He nodded, his fingers trembling as he held out his chipped mug. Thanks, he whispered. Didn't think I'd find a place still open. Clarissa smiled softly. You did. Franklin hadn't spoken all night, but he listened. As the clock ticked past midnight, a man with a snow-covered beard looked up and squinted across the diner. Wait a minute, he said slowly, pointing. Ain't you CB King? The room fell silent. Heads turned. Franklin looked startled. "C.B. King," the man said again, his voice warming. "You got me through a mountain pass back in '98. I was losing signal, stuck in a blizzard, scared out of my mind. But your voice came through. You told me exactly what to do. Saved my life." Another man piped up from a corner booth. "That was you, C.B. King? I remember hearing your voice all the way through Kansas. Black ice and busted chains. You talked me through it." Franklin blinked, stunned. Clarissa held the coffee pot still in her hand. The warmth of recognition filled the room. "Y'all sure have better memories than I do," Franklin said, his voice rough but smiling now. Laughter burst out. The past came rushing back like a river breaking a dam. The quiet man in the wheelchair was suddenly the legend again. The voice that once lit up lonely highways. Clarissa wiped her eyes discreetly, hiding behind the pot of coffee. She hadn't seen Franklin smile like that in years. His shoulders straightened. His eyes brightened. He leaned into the stories, nodding, even laughing a little. Jordan watched, mouth slightly open. The diner glowed, not just from the lights, but from something deeper. From hope. From connection. From the reminder that even broken places still held power. The storm outside still raged. But inside, the fire had returned. Clarissa stood behind the counter, her heart quietly whispering, maybe, just maybe, they weren't done. At one point, Jordan stood beside the grill, arms folded, watching the room. "I've never seen him like this," he whispered to Clarissa. She followed his gaze to Franklin, who was now telling a story about a run through Arizona during monsoon season. The truckers hung on every word. "He was always like that," Clarissa said quietly. "Out there, he was more than a man, he was a voice people trusted." Jordan nodded slowly. "Well, they still do." Clarissa blinked back tears. The laughter in the room grew louder. For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone in the fight. By 2 a.m., the food was nearly gone. The last of the soup had been scraped from the bottom of the pot, the bread reduced to crusts. Still, no one complained. They leaned back in their booths, jackets drying on chair backs, boots steaming near the heater. "It's not much," Clarissa said again, clearing an empty plate. One man smiled. "It's more than we had 5 hours ago." Franklin rolled to the center of the room, adjusting his jacket. "Feels like a good night for an old CB story," he said. Cheers and laughter answered him. Jordan leaned against the counter, smiling. Outside, the wind shrieked and rattled the windows. Inside, the heat was barely holding, the old furnace sputtering with a mechanical cough. Clarissa shot a glance at the thermostat and frowned. "It's struggling," she murmured. "It's old," Franklin replied. "Like me." Just then, Mike, the first trucker who'd entered, stood up. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked. Clarissa hesitated. "It's tricky." Mike waved her off. "So's every rig I've ever driven. Let me try." He disappeared behind the kitchen door, boots squeaking. Clarissa pulled her cardigan tighter. Jordan poked at the grill with a spatula, his face tense. Minutes passed in thick silence. Then a low clang. A hiss. Another clang. Franklin turned his wheelchair toward the sound. Clarissa clutched the edge of the counter, chewing her lip. The furnace groaned once more, then kicked back into life with a low roar. Warm air filled the room again. Mike reappeared, his hands greasy and a grin on his face. "She'll hold," he said. "For now." Relief flooded Clarissa's chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "That might have been the last thing we had working." Mike shrugged. "You had heart. That's more than most places." Still, the kitchen shelves were bare now. Clarissa knew it. Jordan knew it too. He came up to her, voice low. "We're out. Eggs, soup, even the canned stuff." She gave a slow nod. "I'll be right back." She stepped out into the cold, snow soaking through her shoes. The little house behind the diner sat dark, quiet. She moved through it quickly, heading for the pantry. Her hands found 2 frozen meatloaves, a sack of potatoes, and some cans of beans, meant for their own meals later in the week. But tonight they had guests. She didn't even hesitate. Clarissa brought the food back into the diner and handed it to Jordan without a word. He didn't ask, just nodded and went to work. The smell of something new cooking lifted the mood again. The truckers noticed. Nobody said anything, but they saw. Their voices grew softer, more reverent. Franklin watched it all quietly, pride rising in his chest. This was Clarissa, his Clarissa, giving when there was almost nothing left. "You're a saint," one driver whispered as she passed him a chipped mug. She chuckled. "Nah, just stubborn." No one left that night. They pulled the tables together, created makeshift sleeping spaces with jackets and duffel bags. Clarissa found extra quilts in the supply closet. "Take what you need," she said, handing them out. The men and women curled up in booths and on floors. Someone found an old radio behind the counter. Mike fiddled with it until he caught a crackly country station. Franklin rolled closer, chuckling as a tune from 1985 played. "That's a good one," he said. "Drove the whole Texas loop with that playing once." Laughter rippled again. They were safe, at least for now. A young driver, barely 20, sat near Franklin's chair, eyes wide. "You really drove through a blizzard in Idaho." Franklin nodded. "Back in '99. Had a truck running on prayers and duct tape." The kid laughed. "How'd you make it?" Franklin looked thoughtful. Didn't stop moving. Sometimes that's the only rule. Clarissa listened from behind the counter, her heart swelling. This was the man she had loved across thousands of miles and decades of hard roads. He was still in there, still the lighthouse for every lost traveler, and tonight he was shining again. Clarissa stood in the doorway for a moment, looking out into the snow. It was still falling, but softer now, like the sky was tired. She breathed in deep. Inside, the sound of quiet voices and soft music mixed with the smell of food. It was more than a meal. It was a memory in the making. She walked back inside and closed the door behind her. "Let's keep the coffee going," she said. "They'll need it come morning." Jordan raised a mug in her direction. "You got it, boss." She smiled. "Let's ride this storm out together." By dawn, the blizzard had calmed. Pale light filtered through the foggy windows. Most of the truckers were still asleep, curled beneath coats and makeshift blankets. Clarissa moved quietly, refilling mugs, adjusting heaters. Franklin had dozed off with a soft smile on his face, the old CB mic resting in his lap like a relic. Jordan yawned behind the counter, eyes puffy. "Think they'll remember this?" he asked. Clarissa looked around at the bodies, the empty plates, the warmth. "I think they'll remember it forever." She placed a hand gently on Franklin's shoulder. "I know I will." 2 days later, the snow had hardened into icy drifts, untouched and silent. The diner stood still. Clarissa swept near the door, the bristles of the broom scratching softly against the tiles. Franklin wiped the counter with slow, thoughtful circles. The energy of that stormy night felt like a dream now. Something too good, too rare to hold on to. The coffee pot hissed on the burner, mostly full but untouched. Clarissa's eyes drifted to the fence outside, where the for sale sign leaned, partly buried in snow. She sighed. Bills still waited. Time still moved on. Kindness hadn't changed the numbers in the bank. Then came a sound, faint, steady. Clarissa froze. Franklin lifted his head. At first it was just a low rumble, like thunder beneath the ground. Then louder, clearer. The air brakes. The crunch of tires over packed snow. Clarissa dropped the broom. "Frank," she said. He was already wheeling toward the window. One truck appeared on the road. Then another. And another. Within minutes, the entire side street was packed with gleaming rigs, shining like armor in the pale sun. Clarissa stepped outside, her breath catching. They'd come back. All of them. Some she recognized. Many she didn't. but they were here. The front door swung open. Mike stood there, bundled in his heavy coat, his smile wide and familiar. "Hope you've got more coffee this time," he joked. Clarissa laughed, the sound catching in her throat. More drivers came through behind him, boots stomping, jackets dusted with frost. Laughter filled the room again, just like that night. Mike reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. "We passed the hat," he said. "Truckers, dispatchers, companies, even a few from the old radio days." He set it in Clarissa's hands. "It's enough. To catch up. To keep the lights on. To start over if you want." Clarissa stood speechless, the envelope trembling in her hands. Franklin rolled beside her, his fingers lightly brushing her back. Before she could speak, an older man with a long gray beard stepped forward. In his hands he held an old CB microphone. Scarred, scratched, but unmistakable. "Think this belongs to you," he said softly. "You gave it to me in '92 when mine fried out during Colorado storm. Figured it's time it came home." He set the mic gently on the counter in front of Franklin. Franklin stared at it, silent. Then his hand reached out, fingers trembling as they touched it. Emotion swelled behind Franklin's eyes. "I thought I'd never see this again," he murmured. Mike grinned. "You thought we forgot? Everyone from here to the Rockies knows about Jack and Clarissa's now. You're not getting rid of us that easy." The room burst into laughter. Clarissa laughed too, wiping her cheeks with her apron. Jordan peered out from the kitchen, mouth hanging open. "What in the world?" he whispered, stunned at the sea of people. The for sale sign outside leaned forgotten against the fence, snow drifting around its base. Inside there were no empty booths, only stories waiting to be shared. Franklin held the microphone again, turning it slowly in his hand. Clarissa watched him closely. The light in his eyes wasn't a flicker anymore. It was steady, like sunrise melting frost. He turned to the crowd and smiled. "Guess it's time to dust off the old call sign," he said. Cheers echoed through the diner. Clarissa leaned against the counter, soaking in the joy that hummed through the air. She looked around. Her diner, their diner, alive again, not because of luck or money, but because kindness had been answered with kindness, because the road had remembered its own. 1 year later, the parking lot was never empty. Rigs from every corner of the country lined up like pilgrims. Inside, boots stomped, coffee poured, and stories flowed like rivers. Photos lined the walls, signatures covered the booths, and the old CB microphone sat in a glass case by the register. Clarissa wiped her hands on her apron and leaned on the counter, her heart full. "Heard this place is kind of legendary," a young driver said. Clarissa smiled. "First cups on the house," she said. "And if you've got time, we've got stories." The door chimed again. The road had come home. Like and subscribe for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.